Alexandria, 48 BCE, the harbor burns. Flames rise like banners, curling through the night wind that smells of salt, resin, and papyrus. The library stands at the edge of the chaos, marble columns glowing orange, shadows flickering across frescoed walls, once painted with gods of wisdom. Inside, scrolls whisper as they ignite, each one a breath of the ancient world vanishing into light. Ash drifts like snow over statues of poets and philosophers, covering their stone faces in silence. Soldiers rush through the corridors, their torches indistinguishable from the fire consuming everything. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the sound of the sea collides with shouting men and burning knowledge. The world's greatest archive, the memory of civilizations, is dying, one scroll at a time. They said Alexander dreamed of this place, that he stood under an Egyptian sky and promised to build a city that would hold every idea ever conceived. They said he saw it in a vision, a sanctuary where Greek reason, Egyptian mysticism, Persian astronomy, and Indian philosophy would meet and merge into one living organism. Whether that was prophecy or propaganda, no one knows. But the Library of Alexandria began as both a monument and a warning that knowledge, once gathered, could be controlled. Now that monument is turning to smoke. Before we continue, if you love uncovering the buried truths of history, subscribe to Whispers of History. Tell me, where are you listening from? Is it night or day where you are? I find it remarkable that across oceans and centuries, curiosity still connects us, just as it once did for those who came here, searching for truth in a hall of a million scrolls. Let's go back before the fire, before the silence, before the world forgot. 3 centuries earlier, the sun rose over a city that was more idea than geography. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, was designed to be eternal. Its streets were laid out like a grid of logic. Its harbor stretched like open arms to the Mediterranean. And at its heart stood the Mauseon, the temple of the Muses, a university, research center, and royal institution unlike anything before or since. Attached to it was the library, the crown jewel of the Ptolemaic dynasty, containing what ancient writers claimed were hundreds of thousands of scrolls. The Ptolemies, Macedonian kings, ruling Egypt after Alexander's death, were obsessed with the idea of owning knowledge itself. Ptolemy I Soter began the project, but it was his son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who turned it into a machine of collection. Every ship entering Alexandria's harbor was searched. Any scrolls found were seized, copied by scribes, and added to the library. The originals, not the duplicates, were kept. Merchants and travelers left with elegant forgeries, while the real texts, the heart of the ancient world's scholarship, remained locked behind marble and papyrus. In its brightest age, Alexandria was a city of contradictions. Greek language echoed through Egyptian temples, priests debated mathematicians, poets dined beside anatomists, dissecting human bodies for the first time in recorded history. Here, Euclid wrote the elements, defining geometry for 2,000 years. Eratosthenes measured the Earth's circumference with shadows and sticks. Eryphilus traced the pulse through human arteries, calling the heartbeat the music of the body. The library's catalogue itself, 20 years of labor, filled 120 scrolls. The scholars who lived within its walls were priestly in devotion, but political in purpose. They believed that by gathering all knowledge, the Ptolemies could claim not just Egypt, but eternity. Yet even at its height, the library was fragile. It existed at the mercy of rulers who saw knowledge as a weapon as much as wisdom. Ptolemy III demanded the Athenian state loaned him their official copies of Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides, then kept them, returning only copies. His scholars scoured conquered lands for manuscripts, raiding temples and archives. They said one librarian, Demetrius of Phaleron, declared that no book should exist outside Alexandria's reach, as if ideas themselves must kneel before Pharaoh. Knowledge had become empire, but the library was more than shelves of scrolls. It was an ecosystem. Within its colonnades, Scholars were paid by the king, housed in luxury, exempt from taxes, and devoted entirely to study. They lectured in gardens, argued in halls, scented with incense, ate at royal tables. It was a paradise of intellect, but also a prison of dependence. Every word written here served the dynasty that funded it. When Ptolemy wanted a new translation of Hebrew scripture, 72 Jewish scholars were summoned and isolated until they produced what became the Septuagint. It was knowledge under surveillance, divine revelation drafted for royal use. The irony was that the library, created to preserve truth, began quietly rewriting it. Translators altered meanings to flatter kings. Historians omitted scandals. Science was bent to astrology to please superstitious rulers. Even here, among philosophers, truth had a patron. The library's marble facade gleamed like enlightenment, but beneath it, power dictated what was remembered and what was erased. Outside, the city grew louder, more dangerous. By the 2nd century BCE, Alexandria was the beating heart of the Mediterranean and a tinderbox. Greeks, Jews, and native Egyptians lived in uneasy proximity, their tensions suppressed only by Ptolemaic wealth. The port overflowed with spice from India, glass from Syria, papyrus from the Nile Delta. But beneath the commerce simmered resentment. The library's treasures had been gathered through confiscation. Its scholars, many foreign, lived in isolation from the people who built their city. Knowledge, once meant to unite, had become a symbol of elite control. The seeds of destruction were already sown. Then came Rome. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt, drawn into a civil war between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII. His legions occupied Alexandria. His ships blockaded the harbor. When the Egyptian navy attacked, Caesar ordered the ships in the docks to be set ablaze. The flames spread beyond the docks to warehouses, markets, and then the district of the Bruchion, where the great library stood. Ancient accounts disagree on what happened next. Some say the fire never touched the library. Others say thousands of scrolls burned, their ashes carried into the sea. What's certain is that after Caesar's campaign, the library was never the same. Strabo, visiting decades later, described a smaller institution still functioning, perhaps a fragment of the original. Scholars continued to work, but the grand ideal was gone. Knowledge had been humbled by politics, truth by convenience. The city that once dreamed of housing all wisdom now served as Rome's granary, a conquered province exporting grain, not ideas. And yet, even in ruin, Alexandria's library became mythic. People spoke of scrolls that recorded the lost inventions of the ancients, flying machines, healing arts, maps of the stars that predicted empires. They whispered that beneath the ashes lay secrets the gods had meant only for themselves. The destruction gave the library what its existence never could: immortality. But history, like fire, rarely stops where it begins. Caesar's flames were only the first. Over the next 6 centuries, Alexandria would burn again under Aurelian, under Theophilus, under the shadow of the Christian empire that replaced the pagan world the library once embodied. Each time, more of the ancient world's memory vanished. Each time, silence grew louder. And somewhere, beneath centuries of sand, fragments remain, the ghosts of scrolls, the residue of ink, the whisper of what once was. The fire was only the beginning. Centuries before Caesar's ships ignited Alexandria's harbor, the library had already become something greater and more dangerous than a storehouse of scrolls. It was the living nervous system of the ancient world, a place where information moved like blood. What began as Alexander's dream had evolved into an empire of paper and ink, ruled not by generals but by scholars. When Ptolemy I, Soter, took the Egyptian throne after Alexander's death in 323 BCE, he inherited a fractured world. His empire was new, his subjects foreign, his legitimacy uncertain. He needed something stronger than armies to bind them together. He chose knowledge. He imagined a library that would outlive marble and metal, a fortress of intellect that would immortalize the Ptolemies long after their statues had fallen. He called upon Demetrius of Phaleron, an exiled Athenian statesman with a scholar's mind and a politician's cunning. Together, they designed an institution that would conquer through curiosity. Every traveler entering Alexandria was inspected. Every manuscript confiscated. Ships from Rhodes, Athens, and Carthage carried more than goods. They carried human thought, and the Ptolemies claimed it all. Within decades, tens of thousands of scrolls arrived daily. It wasn't theft in their eyes. It was preservation. To them, Egypt was not stealing the world's wisdom, was saving it from decay. The Nile's climate preserved papyrus better than any other place on earth. The Ptolemies believed the gods themselves favored Alexandria's dry air and golden light. They told visitors that here, even words could live forever. The Mousie and the Temple of the Muses stood beside the royal palace, surrounded by gardens where philosophers debated beneath palm trees. The library was part of this sacred precinct, tended by scholars who were more priest than professor. They lived within its marble walls, receiving salaries, free meals, and royal protection. Their devotion was absolute. Imagine walking through its corridors, pillars of polished limestone, bronze lamps flickering against frescoes of the 9 Muses, the air thick with the scent of ink, cedar oil, and smoke from copying fires. Scribes worked silently, copying lost plays of Euripides, hymns to forgotten gods, medical treatises from Persia, and fragments of Egyptian theology older than the pyramids. The scrolls were wrapped in linen, tagged with clay labels, and catalogued according to language, subject, and author. Every wall, every shelf, every breath was order, an attempt to impose logic on the chaos of human thought. But Alexandria's scholars were not saints. Behind their robes and rhetoric, they competed like politicians. The chief librarian, Zenodotus, created the first recorded system of textual criticism, comparing versions of Homer's Iliad to restore the true text. His successor Callimachus hated him and compiled the Pinax, a vast bibliographic index that functioned like the library's nervous system. But Callimachus's notes also carried venom, criticizing rivals, exaggerating his own discoveries, omitting names he despised. Even knowledge had factions. By the reign of Ptolemy II, the library was a city within a city. Scholars argued about mathematics, dissected corpses in anatomy theaters, studied the stars from observatories, and performed experiments with water, sound, and light. It was here that Ctesibius invented the first organ and the hydraulic clock. It was here that Eratosthenes, with nothing more than shadows and geometry, measured the Earth's circumference to within a few hundred miles. Each discovery was celebrated like a military victory. The Ptolemies held parades for mathematicians. They minted coins showing scholars instead of gods. The king dined with scientists as if they were generals. But power, once mixed with intellect, always curdles. Knowledge began to serve propaganda. The library's scribes compiled genealogies tracing the Ptolemies back to the god Zeus, Dionysus, Isis. Scholars were ordered to translate foreign myths to glorify the dynasty. Egyptian priests, threatened by Greek rationalism, retaliated with magic and prophecy. Each tried to claim truth as their own weapon. The scholars, trapped between reason and devotion, learned to lie beautifully. They revised history to flatter kings, softened mathematical theories that contradicted astrology, and reinterpreted Homer to justify imperial conquest. The library that once collected all wisdom began producing curated truth, a luxury product for royal consumption. Still, the pursuit of knowledge continued in the margins. Aristarchus of Samos proposed that the earth orbited the sun. His ideas were buried in scrolls that would vanish centuries later, rediscovered only in whispers during the Renaissance. Herophilus dissected human cadavers, mapping the brain and nervous system with astonishing accuracy, until the church later forbade such acts. Archimedes sent letters to Alexandria describing machines that could lift ships and defend cities, but those letters would burn before any could be fully understood. Every shelf in that library was a time bomb of discovery waiting for a future that never came. By the 2nd century BCE, a second library rose within Alexandria's walls, the Serapeum, named after Serapis, a god blending Greek and Egyptian faiths. Some historians believe it held what survived the first library's losses. Others think it was an entirely new institution. Either way, it became a temple of both knowledge and control. The Serapeum's colonnades housed not only scrolls but idols, oracles, and priests. Pilgrims came not to read, but to be enlightened. The Ptolemies understood the power of spectacle. They made scholarship divine. The library was no longer simply a university, it was a theatre of intellect, where wisdom itself was performed for political gain. Yet even here, amid the incense and hymns, the walls trembled with tension. The priests whispered that the Greeks were defiling sacred Egyptian secrets. The Greeks claimed they were saving them from oblivion. The scholars recorded both sides, careful never to commit fully to either. Truth was a currency too volatile to spend honestly. Outside, Alexandria's streets teemed with sailors, merchants, slaves, and philosophers. The city was a labyrinth of languages, Greek, Coptic, Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, all colliding in the markets. The library stood at the center of this storm, its silence both alluring and infuriating. To the masses, it was a palace for elites. To the elites, it was a mirror reflecting their fear of ignorance. The power of the library was not just in its scrolls, but in its myth. People believed it contained everything: the secrets of the stars, the formulas of immortality, the true histories of nations. Some said it held Atlantean records. Others claimed the tomb of Osiris lay beneath its floors. Each myth added weight to its legend until the truth could no longer breathe beneath it. That legend drew conquerors. To own the library was to own civilization. And so, generation by generation, it became a prize in the great game of empires. The scholars, who had once ruled through intellect, now lived at the mercy of politics. The Ptolemies fell into infighting. Rome loomed on the horizon. Cleopatra would soon walk its corridors, her sandals echoing where Plato's students once debated. By then, the library was already fading. The scrolls were brittle, the catalogue incomplete, the scholars weary. They no longer sought truth, they sought survival. Some fled, taking copies of manuscripts to distant cities: Pergamon, Antioch, Athens. Others stayed, guarding the remaining treasures like monks in a tomb. In time, Alexandria's light began to flicker. What had begun as a dream of eternal knowledge was now a collection of ghost philosophers quoting books no one had seen. Priests chanting hymns to gods no one remembered. Kings commissioning translations of works they couldn't read. But the library's story was not finished. It would burn again. And each time, the flames would not only destroy scrolls, they would rewrite history itself. The centuries that followed turned the library's silence into a kind of echo, distorted, political, and holy. By the dawn of the 1st century BCE, Alexandria no longer belonged to the dreamers who had built it. The Ptolemies had grown decadent. Their court, once filled with scholars, now pulsed with dancers, astrologers, and spies. The library still stood in marble and gold, but its purpose had shifted. What had begun as a temple of ideas had become a weapon of ideology. In this new world, knowledge was not gathered to enlighten, it was hoarded to rule. Every scroll was potential propaganda, every translation an opportunity to rewrite memory. The priests of Serapis watched over their hybrid god. The Greek philosophers still lectured beneath colonnades, and Roman ambassadors now strolled through the courtyards, measuring how this monument to intellect could serve imperial interests. When Cleopatra VII came to power in 51 BCE, she understood the city's symbolic weight. She knew that whoever controlled Alexandria's knowledge controlled the narrative of civilization itself. Fluent in 9 languages, educated by the library's last generation of scholars, she became its final living heir. To her, the library was not just a building, it was identity, diplomacy, seduction. When she met Julius Caesar, she met him armed not only with beauty, but with the intellectual arsenal of centuries. But knowledge had become fragile currency. Caesar's war, and later Antony's, left the city scarred. The first fire had already stolen part of its soul. What remained was fragmented. Some texts moved to the Serapeum, others hidden in private collections. Many vanished altogether. Cleopatra's own death in 30 BCE ended not just a dynasty, but an era. Rome absorbed Egypt, and with it, Alexandria's memory. Under Roman rule, the city transformed from beacon to borderland. The emperors valued its wealth, not its wisdom. They kept the library's remnants alive, barely as an adornment to empire, a relic to display rather than nurture. Scholars still came. Strabo, the geographer, Galen, the physician, Plotinus, the philosopher. They wrote of Alexandria with reverence, but also with unease. It had become a city of ghosts, a museum of lost brilliance. The Romans established new archives, but their purpose was administrative, not intellectual. Census rolls replaced poetry, tax records replaced philosophy. The fireproof rooms built by Augustus to protect state documents were a cruel imitation of what once was. The library's surviving fragments served imperial bureaucracy, not enlightenment. Still, the embers glowed. Beneath the marble floors, in scriptoriums hidden from Roman soldiers, a few scholars continued the work. They copied Aristotle, preserved Hippocrates, commented on Plato. They called themselves philologoi, lovers of words, and they whispered that the library could rise again. But as the empire expanded, the horizon darkened. Rome's gods were dying, its philosophies ossifying, and a new faith, unyielding, absolute, was spreading from the eastern deserts. Christianity would not simply destroy the old world's temples, it would redefine truth itself. The 3rd century was a century of collapse. Civil wars fractured Rome. In 270 CE, Emperor Aurelian fought to reclaim Egypt from the rebel queen Zenobia of Palmyra. The battle for Alexandria raged through the streets and into the royal quarter, where the Bruchion, the district that once housed the great library, still stood. Ancient sources record that much of it was destroyed in the fighting. If the original library had survived Caesar's fire, Aurelian's soldiers likely finished the work. The surviving scholars fled to the Serapeum, the temple of Serapis, where the last collection of manuscripts found refuge under the god's shadow. In that temple, pagan priests and philosophers coexisted uneasily. They performed rituals to Serapis, half Greek Zeus, half Egyptian Osiris, and recited Euclid in the same breath. To them, there was no conflict between science and faith. Both sought divine order. They prayed to geometry, worshipped astronomy, and treated philosophy as sacrament. But history was turning against them. By the time the Roman Empire embraced Christianity in the 4th century, Alexandria's dual identity had become untenable. The new faith sought to purify, to separate sacred truth from pagan lies. For bishops and monks rising to power, the Serapeum represented everything dangerous: the arrogance of reason, the seduction of idols, the temptation to question revelation. The libraries, scrolls, philosophy, astronomy, medicine, myth, all bore traces of the forbidden. In 391 CE, under Emperor Theodosius I, the Roman world became officially Christian. Pagan temples were ordered closed. In Alexandria, the Patriarch Theophilus saw his chance. He accused the Serapeum's priests of blasphemy, incited riots, and led mobs of monks and soldiers through the city. What followed was not a battle, but an exorcism disguised as justice. The temple was stormed, statues were smashed, altars overturned, the priests fled or were executed, and within the temple's libraries, whatever survived of the great library's spirit, the scrolls were dragged out, burned, or left to rot. Witnesses later described papyrus, curling like snakes in the heat. Ink bleeding into the marble, the smell of cedar oil and burning parchment mixing with incense and blood. One philosopher, Ammianus, wrote that the splendor of Alexandria was dimmed, and with it the light of the mind. The destruction of the Serapeum was more than the loss of books. It was the final collapse of an idea that truth could be discovered by reason alone. The Christian bishops preached that all truth was contained in Scripture. All else was vanity. Knowledge that once sought to measure the heavens was now measured against doctrine. Yet the irony of faith is that it preserves what it condemns. The same monks who burned pagan libraries became the world's new librarians. In monasteries across the Nile and the Levant, they copied texts they scarcely understood. Aristotle beside Augustine, Galen beside Genesis. They preserved fragments of the world they had erased. In the flicker of candlelight, the line between destruction and salvation blurred. Even the church could not resist Alexandria's ghost. The patriarchal library that later rose in its place borrowed the same architectural language, colonnades, courtyards, catalogues, but its purpose was reversed. Instead of gathering all knowledge, it guarded one truth. Outside its walls, the sands of Egypt shifted. The city changed hands, Byzantines, Persians, and eventually Arabs. Each conqueror claimed to inherit its legacy. Each left another layer of ruin, but beneath them all, the idea of the library, the dream of a place where the entire human story could be contained, refused to die. By the 5th century, one last figure stood at the threshold between reason and faith, Hypatia of Alexandria, philosopher, mathematician, and daughter of the scholar Theon. She taught in the very streets where the library once stood. Her lectures on Plato drew crowds of pagans and Christians alike. She charted the stars with bronze astrolabes and wrote treatises on the motion of planets. To her students, she was the embodiment of what the library had been: luminous, fearless, and doomed. In 415 CE, amid rising religious tension, Hypatia was accused of heresy by the Patriarch Cyril. A mob dragged her through the streets, stripped her, and murdered her in the Caesareum, the same district that had once echoed with the footsteps of scholars. Her body was burned where scrolls had once burned. With her death, the last living spark of Alexandria's intellectual age went out. The library was gone. The city that had once dreamed of containing all knowledge had become the tomb of it. But the story was not finished. The world would rise again from Alexandria's ashes in Baghdad, Cordoba, and Constantinople. The same manuscripts that survived by chance would ignite new civilizations. The fire that destroyed the library became the light that illuminated the Renaissance. Still, a question lingered in the ruins. Was the library truly burned, or merely transformed? Did the world lose its memory, or did it simply learn to remember differently? The ruins of Alexandria did not cool easily. Even after Theophilus's mobs reduced the Serapeum to dust, the air above it shimmered with heat, as if the city's memory refused to fade. For centuries, travelers would climb the mound where the temple once stood and whisper that beneath it, fragments of the old library still slept. Some claimed that tunnels led from the temple to the harbor, where secret chambers preserved the scrolls untouched by flame. Others said the priests had smuggled them to distant sanctuaries in the desert. None could prove it. But the myth persisted, because the alternative, that humanity had lost its memory forever, was unbearable. The truth, as ever, is less dramatic and more devastating. By the 6th century, the library was gone in all but name, its catalogue lost, its scholars dead or dispersed. Alexandria's once golden coastline, once the center of learning, had become a military post of the Byzantine Empire. The marble colonnades now housed barracks. Where scrolls had once rustled, the only sound was the clatter of shields. And yet, knowledge does not die easily. It decays, it transforms, it hides. The same city that had birthed Euclid and Eratosthenes now became a battlefield of theology. The Council of Chalcedon split the Christian world, and Alexandria found itself at the heart of doctrinal wars between Coptic and Orthodox believers. Debates that once measured the circumference of the earth now argued over the nature of Christ. The tone of inquiry remained, but its object had changed. The scholars who had once mapped the stars now mapped scripture. Still, in dark corners of monasteries along the Nile, echoes of the old curiosity survived. Monks copied fragments of Plato in secret, disguising them beneath psalms. Physicians whispered Galen's anatomy through generations of healers. Alchemists, reading between the lines of holy texts, searched for the universal order once charted in the library's lost works. They did not call it science, but it was the same hunger. And then came the final wave of transformation. In 642 CE, the Arab general, Amr ibn al-G, marched into Egypt under the banner of the Caliph Umar. The Byzantines surrendered without much resistance, exhausted by centuries of internal decay. Alexandria, once again, changed masters. And with that change came the final legend of the library's death, the most famous and the most contested. According to later sources, when Amr conquered the city, he found vast halls of scrolls still intact. He wrote to Caliph Umar, asking what to do with them. The Caliph's reply, legend says, was mercilessly logical. If these writings agree with the Book of God, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are heresy. Destroy them. And so, the story goes, the scrolls were gathered and distributed to the city's bathhouses as fuel. For 6 months, they say, the furnaces burned with the ashes of the ancient world. It is a haunting image, and perhaps too perfect to be true. Historians now doubt the story, noting that it first appeared centuries later, written by Christian chroniclers hostile to Islam. But myths often reveal more than facts. Whether or not Umar's fire existed, the story itself testifies to a truth far older, that every empire, in its certainty, burns what it cannot control. By the 7th century, what remained of the library's spirit was not destroyed by a single act, but by the long, slow erosion of purpose. No conqueror needed to torch the shelves. The scrolls were already lost to neglect, decay, or dispersal. The knowledge survived elsewhere, scattered across the Mediterranean, translated into Syriac, Arabic, and Latin. Alexandria had not died in one blaze. It had bled out across centuries. And yet, the dream lived on, reincarnated in unexpected places. The very conquerors accused of burning the library built new ones. In Baghdad, the Abbasid caliphs established the Beit el-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, where scholars from Greece, Persia, and India translated ancient texts into Arabic. There, under candlelight and the desert stars, Euclid, Galen, and Aristotle were reborn. The science of the Greeks fused with the mathematics of the Persians, the medicine of India, the astronomy of Babylon. It was the library's spirit, resurrected under another name. From Baghdad, the knowledge traveled westward to Cordoba, where Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars read side by side, debating the same ideas that once echoed through Alexandria's marble halls. The light that had flickered out by the sea now burned across continents. The ancient world's lost memory had not vanished. It had merely changed languages. But even in its afterlife, the library remained a ghost that haunted the conscience of civilization. Every culture that inherited fragments of its legacy also inherited. Its wound the knowledge that something irretrievable had been lost. The Renaissance rediscovered Aristotle and Plato through Arabic intermediaries, but their original scrolls were gone. The papyrus that once filled Alexandria's vaults had turned to dust long before Gutenberg's press gave the world back its voice. The scholars of Florence and Venice looked back toward Egypt as one might toward a vanished Atlantis, a paradise of pure reason that had slipped through human hands. And so the myth grew. Each generation embellished it. Painters imagined halls lined with golden scrolls, domes glittering with constellations, scholars in white robes debating beside sacred flames. Writers described the library as if it had contained every secret ever known, the formula for immortality. the history of Atlantis, even prophecies of its own destruction. In truth, the library was human, imperfect, political. But myths do not thrive on imperfection, they thrive on longing. By the 18th and 19th centuries, European explorers, searching for the ruins of the ancient world, spoke of Alexandria as a lost Eden of intellect. Archaeologists unearthed fragments of papyrus, shards of pottery, foundations of colonnades, but never the library itself. It remained both everywhere and nowhere. Today, historians know that Alexandria's loss was not a single tragedy, but a sequence of silences. Fire was only one form of erasure. The others were more insidious: censorship, neglect, translation, and the slow decay of memory. The scrolls that once defined the library were made of papyrus, fragile reeds pressed and glued together. Without constant copying, they disintegrated in the humid air. The irony is cruel. The library that sought to preserve eternity was built on material destined to die. And yet, perhaps that is why it endures in imagination. For every fragment lost, a story was born. For every scroll that turned to ash, a legend rose. Humanity, confronted with its own forgetfulness, invented the myth of the perfect archive, the place where nothing could be forgotten. The Library of Alexandria became that myth, both wound and cure, symbol and warning. Now, when you stand on the modern Corniche of Alexandria and look toward the sea, the waves break over what was once the royal quarter. The modern Bibliotheca Alexandrina rises there, a vast disk of glass and stone angled toward the horizon, its walls engraved with scripts from every known language. It is not a resurrection, but an echo. Beneath its foundations lie centuries of sand, silence, and ash, the sediment of burned dreams. Above it, light pours through the roof like memory returning to the world. Visitors walk its corridors in reverent quiet, knowing they stand on the graves of scrolls that no longer exist. The fire is gone, but the idea that fragile, radiant faith in knowledge still burns. You step quietly into the present, feeling Alexandria not as it is now, but as it once burned, as it once dreamed. The city's layers of memory press against your skin, the salt wind from the Mediterranean, the dust of centuries, the ghosts of scholars who measured the stars and dissected the human body beneath its fading sun. The library is gone, yet it inhabits every corner of the imagination. Its absence is a presence palpable, electric, and mournful. You sense the weight of all that could have been. The Bibliotheca Alexandrina stands today as a monument to both aspiration and loss. Its modern architecture mirrors the ideal of the ancient library, not as a warehouse of scrolls, but as a beacon of intellectual openness. Glass walls reflect the Mediterranean light, and engraved scripts in languages long dead whisper reminders of the universality of human curiosity. You walk past students and scholars, their voices mingling with the soft hum of computers and the faint smell of paper, a trace of the ink and cedar oil that once perfumed ancient corridors. Here, knowledge is democratized. But you know, the Library of Antiquity was never meant to be democratized. It was a fortress, a garden of ideas grown behind walls of marble and hierarchy. Its beauty and its tragedy were inseparable. Think for a moment about the scrolls that were lost, not just the texts themselves, but the questions they carried. What did the first anatomist see when he traced the pulse of a body? Which discoveries never reached the mind of another because a ship sank, a fire raged, or a decree ordered them destroyed? In that silence, the library achieved a kind of immortality. Its absence compelled imagination, forced civilizations to reconstruct the past from fragments, and made curiosity itself sacred. You feel that pull now, a longing to touch the edges of a vanished world, to hear the rustle of papyrus before it crumbled to ash. History moves in waves, and Alexandria's story ripples outward. The Beit al-Hikmah in Baghdad, the libraries of Cordoba, the monasteries of Europe, each became a vessel for fragments of the lost archive. Scholars translated, interpreted, annotated, and sometimes corrupted the knowledge they inherited. The ancient world did not vanish. It scattered like seeds across deserts, oceans, and mountains. What was lost in the harbor fires of Caesar, in the flames of the Serapeum, or in the decay of centuries, survived in new forms, in new languages, under new skies. And yet, every act of preservation was also an act of transformation. What arrived in Baghdad was not identical to what had been read under the frescoed ceilings of the Mausoleum. It was altered, reframed, absorbed into cultures that reshaped it. Memory, once thought eternal in Alexandria, proved fragile, adaptive, and human. And still, the idea of the library itself endured. Philosophers, poets, scientists, and dreamers across the centuries, from Leonardo da Vinci sketching flying machines, centuries after Archimedes imagined them, to Galileo tracing planets that Aristarchus had once plotted, felt the echo of its ambition. The library became not a place, but a promise, that knowledge could be pursued relentlessly, that questions could outlive answers, that humanity could reach toward the infinite even while knowing that it would never hold it. Its fire burned not only in papyrus and ink, but in the minds it inspired. As you move through the modern city, it is impossible not to think of Hypatia. She is both a memory and a warning, brilliant, courageous, and violently erased. Her death reminds you that knowledge is always vulnerable to the passions of the powerful, that reason can be a threat, that the pursuit of truth can be punished, and yet her spirit lingers. Every lecture you attend, every book you open, every debate you witness, carries fragments of her courage. The library's story is inseparable from the lives of those who loved it enough to defend it, even when they could not save it. Perhaps this is the library's final lesson. It was never just the scrolls, the architecture, or the catalogues. It was the collective striving for understanding, the insistence that human thought matters, that ideas are worth preserving, that even the smallest fragment of knowledge carries the power to transform. Its destruction is a caution, but also an inspiration. Every library, every archive, every digital repository today carries the echo of Alexandria, the fragile triumph of curiosity over impermanence. You look out toward the harbor, imagining the ships that once delivered stolen scrolls from every corner of the known world, imagining Caesar's fire, imagining the smoke drifting into the Mediterranean night. Yet the horizon also carries hope. Alexandria, despite centuries of loss, continues to rise. The modern Bibliotheca Alexandrina is not merely a replacement. It is a rebirth of the principle that knowledge should be gathered, shared, and revered. Light pours through its roof like memory itself returning to the world. And in that light, you feel the enduring pulse of human curiosity. The same pulse that first inspired Alexander's vision, that guided Ptolemaic scholars, that illuminated Hypatia's mind, that traveled across Baghdad and Cordoba, that reached the Renaissance, and that carries on today. History, after all, is a conversation across time. The library's flames may have consumed papyrus, but they could not consume the human desire to understand, to measure, to write, and to dream. Its memory survives in every question we ask, every book we treasure, every mind daring enough to seek beyond the limits of its own age. The Library of Alexandria, though physically gone, is everywhere in spirit. So stand for a moment, silent, on the modern Corniche. Feel the wind off the Mediterranean, hear the waves, smell the salt, and close your eyes. Imagine marble halls glowing in sunset, the rustle of papyrus, the debates of scholars, the dreams of kings and philosophers, the courage of women like Hypatia. The library was fire and dream, destruction and resurrection, loss and enduring hope. Its story teaches you that knowledge is fragile, history is perilous, and curiosity is eternal. And now, as you open your eyes, remember this: the fire is gone, but the idea that fragile, radiant faith in knowledge, in the power of human thought, in the promise that nothing need be forgotten, still burns.